Welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where each week you get to hear Sean Steele, professional CEO, growth mentor, and advisory board chair, unpack the strategies that successful founders have used to achieve scale in their businesses. Stay tuned as he interviews the entrepreneurs who've made it, learns from industry experts, and follows a group of founders still striving to scale.
G'day everyone, and welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where we help first-time founders learn the secrets of scaling so they can fulfill the potential of their businesses, make big decisions with greater confidence, and maximize the value they can create in the world. I'm your host, Sean Steele, and I'm joined today by Narelle Anderson, founder and managing director of Envirobank, which I'm sure many of our audience will have heard from or heard about in the last years. How are you today, Narelle?
I'm excellent, Sean.
Wonderful. We're very excited to have you on here today. I can't wait to dig in together. There's a lot of juice in the story of the way that you built your businesses. For those who don't know your background, this is not your first time around the traps. You became the first Aboriginal woman to solely own a waste company, CBD Enviro Services, back in 2000, which I believe you bought, and then you sold 8 years later to a public company, and then founded Envirobank. So that would be 13 years ago now.
Yes. Who's counting?
Years. That's right. And then you still lead that business today, which we'll come back to in a moment. You know, you've won numerous awards over the years for business and leadership over that period, and including, too many to list, but including Australia's top 50 most influential entrepreneurs. And I know on top of this business that you're doing at the moment, you've also got another business in the works. I mean, you don't sit still, do you?
No. Always something to do.
Always something to do. Well, for those, just as by way of introduction, for those who don't know Envirobank Recycling, which is where we're going to spend most of our time today, you've been innovating in the recycling space, obviously for a long time, and Envirobank operates in the sort of the container deposits market. So from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong on anything, you are fundamentally enabling positive environmental and social impact by incentivizing recycling, which keeps litter out of landfill and out of waterways and out of oceans and parks and so on. And you introduced the concept along this journey of reverse vending technology and automated deposits in Australia, which now underpins the container deposit schemes being rolled out across the country. Is that right? Okay, beautiful. Well, I would love for you, it's not a business model that everybody knows about. So maybe you could start by just giving us a quick sort of overview of the business model. Like, who are your customers and how does Envirobank make money? Not everyone understands that. Who's paying who for what in this model? How does that work?
Sure. When we started the business, we were operating in a market where there was no container deposit scheme. So for those that don't know, the container deposit scheme is where you get 10 cents back for the eligible bottles and cans. And in most states and territories, they either now have a container deposit scheme or will have one very soon. Victoria and Tasmania will have one in 2023, and they're the
right.
two remaining. So our business is now underpinned by a container deposit scheme where everybody gets the 10 cents back, and we facilitate that return to the consumer. But when we started, only one state in the country had the container deposit scheme, and that was South Australia. So we were really interested in what happens in public place recycling bins, for example. We had a lot of public place contracts in my previous company, CBD Enviro Services, and they were often very contaminated and so therefore made their way to landfill instead of to a recycling facility. So we really started the business looking at ways to impact that public place recycling and clean up that bin so that waste would be able to be a resource, because if the material is sorted and separated correctly, then it goes from being a waste stream to a resource stream. And that's really what we were focused in. And of course, the way to change people's behaviours, one of two ways, the carrot or the stick, and we all know that. And we just chose the carrot, far tastier than the stick, and built a rewards platform around that and really started to engage directly with consumers to have that conversation about how to recycle right. And of course, that was, now 13, 14 years ago. Everybody's having that conversation now, but back in the day when we were having that conversation, we were the only company having that conversation. And we didn't invent reverse vending machines. Reverse vending machines had underpinned the bottle bills in overseas countries for many, many years. We just went overseas to find an organisation that we could deal with here in Australia and bring that technology to Australia to have that, to use that technology.
So what is the reverse vending machine? Can you just explain that?
Yeah, sure. So there's lots of different ways that we collect the container from consumers, and one of those applications is through a reverse vending machine. And if you think about a vending machine, you put something in and get something out. Well, the reverse vending machine works the same way. You're putting in your bottle or can, and what you get out, not directly out of the machine, but from our app, is a reward for that bottle and can. And that reward can be the 10 cents in a deposit state, or you can exchange that bottle and can for lots of other things that we have on our recycling platform, like Coles vouchers and Velocity points and movie tickets and etc.
That's really interesting because, you know, when you're not involved in this industry or you don't sort of come across it too often, you're on the consumer side. I remember being in South Australia and living there and seeing the 10 cent scheme, which was very common and popular. And so it was very in everyone's consciousness and it was sort of real. And since then we've spent probably, 10 or 15 years not in South Australia and hadn't really seen it emerge. But it recently, we moved to the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and my 13-year-old saw a sign for a container deposit scheme, and he's now absolutely all over it. He's thinking about how he can go around the neighbourhood. Can he letterbox drop, or maybe with some other people will allow him to pick up their materials to go in and get amongst it. But so it really is changing the psychology. That sort of incentive, the incentive model. So just to give people a sense of scale, just in the last 5 years, my understanding is 5 years ago, the business was doing 5 million in revenue, and this year it's doing 23 million in revenue. So that's almost 5x in 5 years. That's a staggering sort of rate of change. What I'd love to get into today is the growth drivers. What's changed in the business during this period? What have been those things, whether they are key moments or key decisions or key investments that you've had to make that have allowed you to capitalize on an opportunity and make the most of, you're creating incredibly, solid, positive social impact. And it's also a business that needs to make money so it can continue to reinvest in itself and grow its impact. So can you just unpack a bit some of the key decisions or the key moments? What are some of those? Well,
some of the drivers for taking our business from 5 to 23, 24, our new markets opening. So fundamentally, the majority of our business is underpinned by container deposit legislation. And as each of the new states has opened, that has presented an opportunity for us to grow and scale our business. But sitting side by side with that, for us, really, the key driver for us is about innovation. So as those new markets open, we have always come to market with something new, whether that be a new technical product, a new application, or just a different way to do the service. So in Queensland, when we entered the market in Queensland, and we have 50 plus sites in Queensland, we introduced a new product called the Smart Pod, which interacts with an app that we have called Crunch, and that allows consumers to drop off their containers in bulk in a bag located at a shopping centre. We have reverse vending machines in smaller retail applications. We have large super kiosks sitting out in car parks, and then we have our fully automated depots. So our growth has really been a combination of new markets opening and new products and services that we've introduced to the market. And we will continue to grow this business this year. Our projections for this year are we should finish FY22 at somewhere around the $35 million mark. And again, because we're looking at new ways to always innovate and do our business. And there are a lot more containers in the marketplace that need to be collected.
Right. And what does that mean from, have you, as a result of having taken a sort of, a heavy R&D approach in building your technology suite out early, does that mean you've had a bit of a first mover advantage? Like, are you quite ahead of the competitors when it comes to technology? Have some of the technologies you've built or you've implemented become common? What's the competitive landscape like for you?
Yeah, so in terms of technology, in respect to reverse vending machines, we buy our reverse vending machines from a manufacturer in the States, and they are the number 2 global provider. But what we do that is innovative is we take the base technology and then we wrap a service application around that. And in that respect, we are most definitely ahead of our competitors. And our competitors are not small organisations, they're billion-dollar companies. But being a small company in comparison to those businesses, the opportunity in that is that we can be more nimble and take advantage of market opportunities more quickly than perhaps some of our competitors can, purely because of their structure, perhaps not necessarily because they don't have the capability, but more to do with the structure of those organisations versus ours. So we get out there and innovate quickly and move on, and then they catch up, and then we look for something else. So a bit like the rabbit, always running away, from the fox. But that's really been a great advantage for us to date, our size.
So does your growth, how much of it sort of is enabled when you think about some of the different elements of growth? How much of that is enabled by the sites and the locations and I guess the accessibility of the model, and how much of that is about driving the consumer behaviour to return to those places rather than just be in those places? How do you think about that?
Yeah, they're both connected. So when we look at entering a new market, we look first for an appropriate location that has a good population base. No point putting a facility where there's no people. So we look first at the population base, and then we look to provide a service into the marketplace that is a good service that customers will want to keep coming back and using. And, again, we do that through our rewards platform. We do that through the kind of facilities that we set up. We do that through our customer service. And we do that by making sure that all of our sites are in convenient locations. So we have a partnership with Coles, and obviously there's Coles supermarket in just about every suburb. And so we look to work with them on locations where we know people are going on a daily, weekly basis. So it makes sense. We want people to continue to recycle, and we need to get people changing their behaviours. So again, we really look at how can we tap into existing behaviours instead of trying to create something new that people are doing. Everybody goes to the supermarket now. So doesn't it make sense if you're going to the supermarket to put your recycling bag in the back, since you've got to take a bag to the supermarket anyway now? So put your bag in the back of the car with your full containers, drop them off into the smart pod in the car park and go on in and do your shopping and then repeat.
Makes a lot of sense. What about funding, Narelle? Because every business that's fast growing, depending on their kind of working capital profile and the amount of time fundamentally from the time that you spend $1 to acquire a customer or attract one to the time that you get paid, that cash flow profile can have real implications if you're growing at the speed that you've been growing. How has funding, what role has it played in your journey, and how have you tackled it?
That's, I think, the biggest challenge for fast-growing businesses. Often the cash flow doesn't keep up with the growth of the business, and that's always a challenge and is always a struggle and juggle, if you like. We're lucky in that once we set up our facilities, the money flow, the way that we are paid by our contractors, is in 7 days. So that helps with cash flow. And all of the growth to date has been funded by our own investors. To scale the business going forward, we might look for some external investors to participate in that. We also have obviously bank funding, and it's a good business. It's been going for 13 years and it's in a market that is growing every day. with even more opportunities now that there are restrictions for exporting some of this material into other markets, overseas markets. So that brings challenges, but also brings opportunities here in this space. And so we have some bank funding as well that help us with our equipment.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. What about people? Because, any business that's growing quickly is fundamentally very reliant on the people they can attract, the people they retain, how those people engage, the culture they build, and everybody knows there'd be no founder who wouldn't say, people are absolutely critical. But I'm interested in more detail. What have you learned over that period of time, and maybe what mistakes have you made in the context of people as you've been trying to grow the business? The stuff that's actually really made a difference to you.
A business, it doesn't matter what the business is, we're not quite in the robot era yet. So every business relies on people. And there is a saying that a business is the sum of the people that work there. And I do strongly believe in that. If you have great people, you have a fantastic business. And so the challenge for any founder is to find those great people. And, whenever I talk about people and talk to my people, we always talk about being on the bus. So running a company is a journey. Owning a company is a journey. We talked about the growth at the beginning of this chat, the growth of Envirobank. Well, that's a journey. You're a company. You're not the same company at 5 million that you are at 25, that you are at 35, that you are. And along the way, you need different skills. So if you think about that as a bus ride, at different times we need certain types of people on the bus to drive us and get us to the next station. And then we need to swap out. So it's really, for us, about being very transparent with the people that come to us, finding out really what they are looking for in terms of their career journey. And we really make a concentrated effort to enable people and give people the skills for their next stop. So, gone are the days where people came into a company and stayed in a company for 10 years, and that was like a badge of honour. We do have a number of people that have been with us for that time. But more often these days you see people changing roles in the 3 to 5 year mark. So we just need we put systems and processes in place to make sure that along the way, while people are adding value to our business, that we're adding value to them and to their potential career path. And for me, I get super excited about that. So more recently, one of my team leaders up in Queensland told me that he was leaving to start his own business. And, I was overjoyed, super sad to see him go because he was a rock star, but super excited that he had learnt some things at Envirobank that were going to enable him to start a business of his own. And we offered him the opportunity while that business was starting up to work with us casually, because Cashflow is a bit of a challenge. And I think he was a bit surprised, but, I'm always super excited to hear what people are doing next. And when you do that, you get people that are more engaged. And
I love that metaphor. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, you not only get people that are more engaged, but really that's a responsibility of a business. Because a business is the sum of the people that work there, you really do have to work on that. It's not, it's not a given. And sometimes people come into the business and it's not the right fit. And so it's also being honest and transparent about that and have that conversation early.
The thing I like about that is when you can use a metaphor like that creates a culture where, there's plenty of founders that I've met that still fall into the trap of hoping that if I do a great job, like if I really invest in these people, maybe they will stay for 10 years or they'll stay for 15 years. And I think that sort of level of acceptance to go, you know what, it's not a bad thing if people come and go over time. Yes, we'd all love, as long as we can get, but that metaphor that says, hey, it's not a bad thing to be able to get on the bus. Maybe you might move around seats. Maybe you stay in the same seat. Somebody might actually sit in front of you, and it's okay if the business is growing around you. That may mean that you don't need to be in the seat that's the next one right in front of you. It might be a good time for somebody else to be in that seat, but that doesn't mean that you can't move to the seat beside you or a seat further back or right up the front. And when it's time for you to get off the bus, will be there to support you. I think that really opens up a healthy dialogue of also people being willing to, I don't know if this has been an experience as a result of that, but I can imagine that people are far more willing to say, you know what, actually in 6 months' time, I'm thinking it might be time for me to jump off this bus. And it's so much better when they have that conversation with you 6 months ahead, because it allows you to plan, it allows you to chat about it. It's not about, oh, well, that means they're going to try to really keep me. You might be going, hey, that's wonderful. Let's plan for a really healthy and sort of transparent exit for you, where you don't feel like you've got to hide it from me until the very last minute. And then I get absolutely no notice, which I always think is the worst possible outcome, is that nobody knows about it because they were scared to tell you. I'd much rather know as a leader. Have you found that sort of metaphor and the way you've built culture has had people give you far more advanced notice when they feel like they're ready for a change or they want to do something different?
Not only do we get advanced notice, but we get exciting scenarios. So like the young fella that told me that he was wanting to go and start his own business. So I had a whole, awesome. So, think about this, think about that, and almost a business mentoring session with him. We've had others that have, gone on, have got to the capacity in terms of a marketing role, for example, and then have gone on to do something else in another organisation. And I've made an introduction to them if they've outgrown the role that we have. And that's really the trick, bring people into your organisation and help them grow. And at some stage, depending on where you are in your journey as a business, they may outgrow you. And when they do outgrow you and they're good people, introduce them. I obviously have a very comprehensive network, so I have introduced a lot of people that work for me to other founders. And helped them into other roles. And it's really about making sure that we know what everybody's superpower is. And if you play, for a founder, all founders will tell you that they play in their passion, but that doesn't just have to be for an entrepreneur. If you play in your passion every day, then that's the sweet spot, right? That's where you need to be. And sure, there's some things that you may do on a day-to-day basis in your job that you don't love. There's a number of things that I do day-to-day that I don't love. I'm a born salesperson and I don't love reading tender documents, but I have to read them.
I'm with you.
I don't love that, but I have to do that. But it's also, again, having that conversation with your team, and so that you don't have the negative chat. And it's even more important now that we are in this hybrid world that we're in, where everybody's working from home, to find out what everybody's sweet spots are and what their passion is, so that we can spend 80% of our time doing what we love, and acknowledging, okay, these are the things that I don't like, so let's get somebody else to maybe help with those things.
Yeah.
Over the years, over the years with Envirobank, whenever there's been a challenge that we've had that's involved teams, comes back to one thing, one word, one thing only, and that is communication. And whenever I talk to my HR girl, I say, what is it that we didn't say or they didn't hear that has caused this challenge that we have? And it's always about communication.
I like the fact that you said that there's two different elements to that, because communication is not just about communicating in one direction. Your intention for that communication actually has to be received as that intention. Otherwise, the communication wasn't successful in the first place. And I find, I remember hearing a long time ago an example of, you put two stick figures on a piece of paper and you say, okay, well, which one of these is responsible for communicating to the other? Okay, I want to get a message across to you. How much am I responsible? And people say, I don't know, this one's 30%, that one's 70%. Okay, 30% the speaker and 70% the listener, or 70% the speaker and 30% the listener, or 50-50 or something. And you go, but to the extent that both parties don't take 100% accountability for that communication, to the moment that you drop your accountability for getting your intention across to less than 100%, you essentially are giving yourself this gap to blame somebody else because the communication wasn't effective. It's like, to your point, yeah, but we said that. It's like, well, yes, we might have said it, but if our intention wasn't transferred, actually the communication wasn't successful in the person, and you can't blame the other person. Yes, we're hoping they've got behavioral flexibility and they'll listen differently and so on, but if you haven't actually really thought about how to deliver it, check that it's been understood, then you are sort of, handing over the power of the communication, and you've got all these reasons to blame everyone, but that doesn't help anyone because the outcome doesn't occur in the first place.
We use some when we first had this conversation. When I first had this conversation about communication many years ago now, we found this app. And we do a lot of testing and a lot of different trials, and we try lots of crazy things at Envirobank. Anyway, we found this personality app, and it was matching personality. And I sent it out at the time. We didn't have as many people as we had now. Anyway, we sent it out, and it was basically like a Tinder personality app, let's call it that. And it told you what personality type you were, and it matched you with others. So it'd be like, oh, Narelle, you'll be great friends with Sean, or you'd be great mates with. And it was really clever in that it also said, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And it was really a pivotal moment at Envirobank because I had a sales girl that worked for me, and she was an exceptional sales girl. And when I read her profile, I called her in and I said to her, I just need to ask you a question. I said, I'm pretty sure that every time you have a meeting with me that you leave the room thinking, I got nothing from that. And she burst out laughing and she said, yes. And I said, because I've just read the way that you like to hear things and the way that I communicate. We're at opposite ends of the scale. So I said, here's what we're going to do. I can't change me and you can't change you. But now I know what you need. I will make sure that every time you come to a meeting with me, if you send me what you need beforehand, I'll make sure I have the answers for you when you come to that meeting so that you can go on and do your job. And it was just super interesting. I mean, she was a girl that had been with me for a long time. We got along famously, but it was just a really kind of eye-opening moment. I just laughed. I said, oh my God, I've basically terrorized you every time you've had a meeting with me. She was like, I was like, not really, but I was like, no, I get it, I have. So let's try this. So it's really understand, and it was fun to see other members of the team do that, because when you're in the doing, and there's deadlines to meet and there's things going on at home and all of that, you forget that everybody's an individual. So understanding what makes people tick and how people think and how they like to receive information is really important and super helpful. And you keep people longer because you bothered to do that exercise. And it's also
to think about it.
It's also a bit of fun. So, there's some people, and you can probably hear from this interview, I talk very quickly, so I come in, drop a bomb and move on. And that works well for some people, but other people are like, what did you say? What are we meant to do? So yeah. I know now how to deliver my messages and how to communicate and who to communicate to so that it gets to everybody in the manner that it needs to so that we can execute.
Well, the thing I like about that is that it's not just understanding communication so that it happens better in the workplace, but going through these exercises actually offers a personal development opportunity for teams, because they get illuminated. They have learnings about themselves that quite often they didn't know about. And you mentioned before that there's almost this sort of obligation as leaders to create the opportunity for people to understand where they can play in a sort of passionate space. What are the things that give them energy in their job? What things take energy away from? And quite often people aren't conscious about that. They just assume there's a whole bunch of tasks in the job and that's what you got to do. But this offers a real opportunity, I think, to uncover some of those strengths and the communication styles, but such that person can succeed in the long term. Yes, they get benefit whilst they're with you, but it's also a gift to the individual for them to learn that about themselves for the future, for when they inevitably jump off the bus, for something different further on. Can I ask you, Narelle, what, even though people hear these sort of growth rates and go, wow, she's 5 5x'd in 5 years, and that's amazing. There's no growth chart that is a straight line. As I always say, when you zoom in on the growth chart, you actually discover it's a whole bunch of, squiggly lines up and down, peaks and troughs, peaks and troughs. Yes, the trend line might be going up over time, but it's not like everything's, sweet and sailing all the time. What have been some of the mistakes that you feel like you've made as a leader, whether it's in this business or in the last one, that when you think back, have actually been quite instructive, things that you probably wouldn't do again because you recognise that maybe it didn't give you the outcome you were looking for?
When I first started business, I winged it a lot. So I still wing a little bit, but I winged a lot more when I first started the business. I wouldn't do that again. It's really, really important, especially the bigger you get and the bigger your teams get, to have a strategy and to be very focused on that strategy, and to make sure that everybody knows what that strategy is. I didn't, when I first started the business, put enough time and effort into not so much branding, but the value of the brand, and really the comms sitting behind that. So I would make sure that I did that first up. I didn't really do that till year 3 or 4.
Did you miss out on opportunities as a result? What was the problem that sort of emerged as a result of not focusing on it?
I think was an unclear communication strategy into the marketplace.
Right.
So, everybody knew that we were doing recycling, but what specifically were we doing? Why? What was the benefit for the consumer? How are we going to deliver it? All comes back to, again, communication. So I would have done the strategy work that we do now on an annual basis back then. That's really important. It's important once you've done the strategy, though, to make sure that everybody knows what the strategy is and it isn't a document that you put in the bottom drawer until next year's retreat when you have another strategy day. Mm-hmm. And that every meeting that we have now talks back to, okay, well, what part of the strategy is your responsibility, and what are the milestones that you need to achieve, and what really, really, really importantly, what does success look like on a daily, weekly, monthly basis for you? Pick a number. Numbers are important, so pick a number, and what does that success look like? So it's no good everybody, the managing director and, the management team knowing what the container numbers are if the team don't know what they are. And if you don't know that, 200,000 containers in one day at a depot is great, can we all let's celebrate that collectively and together. So share the numbers. I think in the past, it's changing now, but many businesses have not shared numbers. There are numbers that are really important and really big drivers of businesses, and it's really important that you share those numbers and that people know, again, what success looks like.
And I think that really speaks to the concept both of lead indicators and lag indicators, because my question was going to be, how do you approach, and you're alluding to it at the moment, how do you approach that integration between strategy and execution? How do you take a strategic, everyone might know the strategy, but that doesn't mean that people actually feel involved or accountable, or, to your point, have clarity as to what does success look like on a daily or weekly basis. How do I know if we're actually, do I have to wait for an update every quarter or every 6 months or once a year to go, hey guys, you're doing really well? Like, how do I know in my job that I'm doing, if I do X, that it's actually leading to the delivery of that strategy? How do you think about that sort of the mix of lead and lag indicators and creating accountability all the way into the front line for the delivery on the strategy?
Well, because we're well known for innovation, and I can assure you that not all of that innovation comes out of my head. It comes from everybody collectively that works at Envirobank. So 2 things, the strategy and then our organisational values, and encouraging people to have a go. So once we've done the strategy, and the strategy, by the way, needs to be, I have one here, on one single page. So here's our 90-day strategy. Needs to be on one single page. And then I encourage our team leaders and management team to innovate inside their team. And when I'm asked Now, what do you think about this? I simply say, is it in line with our strategy? And is it in line with our core values, which are really important that everybody in the organisation knows what the core values are? And if the answer is yes to both of those, I really don't need to know what the actual initiative is, because it's going to be the right one. And I try and stop people, if you like, now from asking me, specifically what I think about certain things, because then you just get one person's point of view. And if it is in line with the strategy and in line with our core values, then it cannot possibly be the wrong decision. It may not be something that I would have done, but it cannot be wrong if our strategy is right and our core values are right. So that's how we get to innovate, by having those conversations. And sometimes we'll go, oh, it's actually probably not in line with our core values. Okay, so you know what the answer is.
I always used to think about trying to overlay a sort of triangle over every decision, and trying to get my teams to think about if the proposal or the initiative or the project is going to create a win on each side of this triangle, then it's probably a good idea. But if there's some gaps, then it may not be a good idea. And the three sides of the triangle are: is it a win for the organisation? Is it a win for the team members of the organisation? And is it a win for the customer or the key stakeholders that you have in the business? That might be consumers or businesses or regulators or who knows. But if everybody wins as a result of that, it's probably likely to be a good idea. But if it's a bit lopsided, like, hey, it's great for the organization's profitability, but customers are probably going to hate it, or it's great for the organization, but actually it really makes the job of the team super difficult, and no one's going to enjoy doing that. If it's lopsided anywhere, it's probably not going to sustain as something that will carry on into the future. So it was an interesting way of taking that thinking to and the organization winning includes, is it aligned with the strategy? Is it in line with the values? And commercially, is it sensible? Is it viable? Is it going to work? Interesting sort of set of optics to apply to it.
Well, values are super important, and I think values are something that every organisation has, and they put them up on their board. And but for values to be important, they need to be a part of everyday conversation. So when we have a client meeting, for example, and we're meeting a new client for the first time, we ask what their values are, and then we sit back and listen, because you can hear in a conversation what people's values are. So, I could say that I'm a kind person, but if on the way in, I said something mean to somebody, we're not really a kind person. So it just, living by those values really, and making sure that we're aligned with our customers. Gets easier to do that as you are bigger. You get the opportunity to say no if you're not values aligned. When you start a business, obviously you say yes to everybody because you need the business. But as you get bigger, they become more and more important.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's also, the bigger you get, if there's any if the foundations of those values and how they actually should be turning up in the business is loose or shaky, it's very difficult to keep a culture intact, or for the culture to continue to evolve. Like, I don't think cultures should be necessarily staying static. We talk about, people recruiting for cultural fit, and I always think cultural fit is good, but cultural contribution is better. What's the person absolutely needs to fit with the culture, and what else are they bringing that's going to help to evolve the culture? Because if the culture stays exactly the same, but the business is trying to grow and scale, then probably the culture needs to evolve, with it. It's going to have to sort of ebb and flow. That doesn't mean the values might be different, but how they show up or how they sort of match and adapt to the circumstances might be different.
Exactly.
Narelle, when you think back on your time so far in Envirobank, what are you proudest of?
Big question. So many things. What I'm proudest of, and we spent a lot of time in this interview talking about this, I'm proudest of the opportunity that our organisation delivers to people. I'm proudest of the contribution that because we're an employer and we have 120 people that work for us, so we make a contribution to people's families. I'm proudest of that. I'm proud of the fact that we do good work in community, And what we do in communities, we educate communities so that they can go on and serve themselves, which kind of sounds a little bit counterintuitive because we do ourselves out of a job. But there is a poem that I talk about often, which was written by Ralph Waldo Emerson, which is the definition of success. And that is simply to leave the world a better place because you have existed. And I know that the world will be a better place because Envirobank and other businesses like Envirobank exist. So I'm proud of those things.
That's beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that. And if you were to take yourself out into the future now, let's say we go out 3 years into the future, what do you think Envirobank's going to look like in 3 years?
Well, what will we look like in 3 years? Well, we'll be bigger. We'll be in more states. One of our strategic goals is to be a best employer. So we're working really hard. That's one of our strategic goals that we're working on. So really, lots more people on the bus.
Probably going to need a bigger bus.
Well, yeah, and along the way, sometimes our buses had 3 wheels. Now it's kind of like a really cool Greyhound bus that's got TV screens on the back of every chair, and there's a loo down the back. It didn't start like that.
It's probably going to have those sort of concertinas that you're going to have like connecting the buses getting pretty long.
Yeah. And you can, it's maybe like one of those, the Garn bus where you can go from the front to the back and swap out all the time. So it looks a bit like that. We want to be recognised as an organisation that has made a change to recycling in Australia. And to do that, we need to facilitate the collection of more bottles and cans. And engage more kids. Kids are the ones that have completely got it. The challenge is people my age. Older people also get it. The challenge is
changing their behaviour.
The middle level.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I have one last question for you, Narelle, and this is a segment that I do with all of our founders who've scaled, and it's called Above All Else. And so I want you to now go even further out to the future. So imagine you're in your yearning years. You've built as many businesses, and I'm sure there's many more to come, given your ambition and your energy. You've built as many businesses as you've wanted. You've had as much impact in the world as you would have hoped, and you're in your yearning years. You've got incredible wisdom in your still in your mind, and you get a call from the global CEO of the world's largest community of first-time founders, and she gives you an opportunity to reflect on. I mean, she's got this community where there's tens of millions of them. They're super hungry. They want to know how to scale their organizations, and she offers you an opportunity to finish one sentence, which is, above all else, the 3 things that founders must get right if they want to scale are. What would be your 3 things?
Strategy, focus, and values.
I love that. Beautiful and simple and poignant. Thank you so much, Narelle. Well, I'd really like to acknowledge you, Narelle, for the way that you've built this, company. I think you have really taken a very transparent approach in the way that you're building your culture. I love that metaphor of people being on the bus and trying to create as much value as you can together whilst they're on it, but recognizing that it's not an infinite journey and not everyone's going to stay on in the same seat and so on. I think that's beautiful. I also get really excited when you find an entrepreneur who has been able to create real positive and lasting change in the world and is succeeding in scaling the organization, because that scales their impact. And that is what this entire show is about. It is about helping people not get out businessed. If that was a verb, it should be a verb to just business somebody, meaning I come across founders all the time who have wonderful products and services that really create value in the world, but actually they don't run their businesses as well as some other people. And sometimes people have inferior products or services that end up therefore gaining market share, and you're thinking, but if this person could just figure out how to scale this organization, they'd create so much more value. And so I get really excited when I see someone who's nailing both sides of that. They've got real purpose, they're creating real impact, but they're also scaling the organization, which just accelerates that opportunity to create value in the world. So thank you for bringing that to all of us in Australia, and we look forward to seeing that continue to evolve. How can people get in touch with you or follow along with what you're doing or with what Envirobank's doing?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity and thanks for those kind words. It's often difficult as the founder. You don't, the balance sheet doesn't always tell you whether or not you're doing a good job. I can say that. How can people get in touch? We'd love people to join our rewards platform. So they should go onto our website, envirobank.com.au, and join Crunch, our rewards program. And that's where you'll hear more from us. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if anybody listening wants to have a chat about something, I'm happy to have a chat. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you are calling me, don't leave a voicemail message because I hate voicemail.
Me too. I'm with you. I always wait for it to go to the voice to text because at least you can read it in about 2 seconds.
I don't even think it works, to be honest. I haven't listened to a voicemail message for about 5 years now, so.
I love it.
Hopefully I haven't missed any opportunities.
7,000 unread messages in there.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed the show today. Huge thanks to Narelle Anderson from Envirobank. Big thanks to you, Narelle. And of course, folks, before you go, if you got value from today and you liked what you heard from Narelle, then please jump on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, leave a review. It all helps the podcast get into the hands of more people. And our team works super hard to put this together for you, so it gives them a huge kick. We read every single one of them together. They really get some joy from that. If you'd like to know when new episodes are going to come out, or you'd like to access free downloads and tools provided by our guests, then please go to the website, scaleupspodcast.com. You can register your email there. And if you have a question for one of our founders, a question for Narelle or a question for me about scaling your organization that you'd like myself with a guest to tackle in a future episode, you can just jump straight on the website. You can click the speak pipe button on the right-hand side of the website and you can just leave an audio message. Narelle won't listen to it, but I will listen to it for Narelle and make sure it gets to her, or that we handle that one. And finally, if you love the socials, then you can find us on at Scale Ups Podcast on any of the relevant socials. But please remember before you go today, the only thing that's going to guarantee that you can't scale is giving up. And it's going to get hard, and there's going to be periods where you're going to want to give up. But that's the journey, right? The journey is to stay, and the challenge is to stay unshakable in your faith that you're going to achieve the goals that you've set for the organization, and remain flexible in your approach, because how you think you'll get there probably won't end up being exactly the way that it ends up happening. But you've got to stay on the bus, otherwise you don't get to the destination. You've been listening to the Scale Ups podcast. I'm Sean Steele, and I look forward to speaking with you again next week. Thanks so much, Narelle.
Thank you.
G'day everyone, just a couple of quick things before you go. If you have questions that you'd love myself or an upcoming guest to tackle about challenges that you're facing in scaling your business, please just jump straight on the website, scaleupspodcast.com. You can record your message straight from your mobile by hitting the button on the right-hand side of the page, or you can just email them the old-fashioned way, questions@scaleupspodcast.com. And just a quick reminder, nothing we spoke about today constitutes financial or business advice. If you are considering making big decisions in your business, seek out a professional who can look at your situation in detail and make sure you're getting sound, personalised advice. Thanks for listening. Look forward to being back in your podcast feed next week.